everybody, I'm Jody Vance.
And I'm George Affleck.
And it's time for...
Unspun, moist. Is that wrong?
I don't even know what to do with that.
I just was moistening up my my speaking voice to speak today, to be more moistly. We could talk more about that later.
Okay, let's get to that later because I want to start super hyper local. Can we start hyper local? Because you got some stuff going on Twitter, George _Affleck. George.
I've been quiet lately, but not today. Yeah. Underscore.
But okay, well, let's start first with a couple of positives because Lord knows we've got a lot going on. Like to everybody who is struggling right now, social isolation. If you're struggling with your mental health, like reach out to somebody. If you're feeling this is even harder at any time, reach out to somebody virtually. Find a way. Mm-hmm. Email. Come at George and I on Twitter. If you're on Twitter, I'm at Jody Vance. George at George _Affleck. Or you could reach out to somebody like, I don't know, Brad West. Seems like he's there for everybody.
Now you're going to get me all fired up, aren't you?
I am, really. Well, the positives are like Van City, the bank, Van City, have done something great for people. They have basically pressed pause on interest on credit cards and late payment penalties on credit. I mean, what a great instant relief for somebody who's like, how am I going to get groceries this week?
18% usually or whatever it is on credit cards. That's a huge. I mean,
plus a late fee.
Yeah, and zero. That means they're going to be paying the credit card companies because I don't think the credit card companies are going to actually go to zero. So I'm not sure what that deal is, but it's going to cost Van City money for sure. Yeah, no, there's some private sector people doing some good stuff out there. There's governments trying to do good stuff. There's government doing nothing. I mean, Brad West is a perfect example of somebody who, we talk a lot about Brad, and, he is, nobody quite knows where he is on the spectrum, but as far as politics, but he's proven to be pragmatic as a politician and sensible, something that I think on a local level is really crucial.
Tell people what he's done, though, this week.
This week he announced two simple things. No 0% tax increase, which for him was like not a huge deal because he was at, whatever it was, quite close to zero before, but 0%.
That was
tax increase
1.2 or something.
Yeah, it was really low. And then next year, or don't worry about paying your taxes until September. So it's 3 month wait. Don't worry about it till September. Simple things, but and he may be dealing with some layoffs and things like that because of the fact that nobody's working and to save some money. I'm not sure most cities are, but that's a simplistic simple way to kind of go. Okay, I'm thinking about you guys, you voters and electorate and people of my town. On the same day, we had the mayor of Vancouver do a half-hour speech about what he was going to do, and that was interesting.
For those who missed it, give us a synopsis, George, because a lot of people have he got bumped by Bonnie Henry.
Ouch.
By the way, yeah.
As well, you should. If I get bumped by Bonnie Henry, I'd be fine with that too. I mean, what the heck? She's so, her voice just makes me want to have a nap. So he comes into his solution, which was he gave 3 scenarios of massive deficits and 50 million, 100 million, 200 million, but his solution really was I'm going to ask the province for a $200 million grant to pay to underwrite this deficit we're going to have. And I'm like, whoa, buddy, like back it up, because the first thing, I mean, obviously the province and the federal government are inundated with costs for them, especially the federal government, but certainly the province with their $500 for renters and all these other things they're doing. They don't need the cities now asking for cash at this point, especially if they haven't had a time or done the work, at least publicly or in any kind of visible way that I've seen in Vancouver, to look at the numbers and look at what is the budget. Show us, be transparent. Imagine Vancouver being transparent. What a concept. Look at your budget and find some solutions that might work so that you don't have to go out with your hat in hand asking for cash from the province. I mean, not yet. We want to find ways to keep the city running, of course, and they're required to have a break-even budget, an operating budget. But they have lots of tools at the city to I think, to find solutions before they go and ask for cash from the province.
Can you give us a little bit of a history lesson here, George? Because somebody like myself who I'm following it, I'm watching along, and I've often found myself looking at you going, why is that money not there? And you're like, oh no, that's a different budget. It's like, that's in one. And the thing, I'm like, I can't keep up. And then when I'm listening to you now, and what I'm seeing happen on your Twitter, and some of the screen caps you put up have been really fascinating to me. And long before COVID-19 was a thing, long before any of this upheaval, financial upheaval was in play, we on this very podcast were questioning why we don't have a budget that is, let's look at what the overall budget is. What can we afford to do and get rid of the things that just continue to be line items? And that doesn't seem to be part of the transparency.
Zero-based budgeting, start from zero and work your way up and then say, okay, this is how much we need and here are the bells and whistles. And the fact that we've gone, over 10 years of massive prosperity. And in those years, and this is while I was in office, I was very clear about this. And people would say, oh, you're being so conservative, you're the classic conservative, And I would always argue that, we need to put some money aside for a rainy day to make sure that when the shit happens, like is happening, because something will happen, whether it be a massive decline in the economy or CACs disappearing or whatever it might be, or earthquake, you need to have a bunch of money set aside. So, and especially if you're quite prosperous, and we have been quite prosperous in Vancouver, but we've been using that money and spending it this faster than we've been getting it in. The budget's gone under vision, and now this new government from in 2009 from about 900 million, and now it's 1.6 billion. So way faster than it should be for the rate of growth of our city. And in the meantime, there's just nowhere they haven't been saving. They've been asking for more money. There is one line item called I have to check the stabilization fund, the revenue stabilization fund, general revenue stabilization fund. That's the one area in the budget that you kind of, where you set aside money. There's about 160 million in there. My feeling is that if that fund had been grown to around 400 million, which it should have been in those 10 years, we would have the money now to deal with this, and we wouldn't have to lay off anybody. We could have and we could move forward in a prosperous and really positive way. But now he does a speech where he says, your taxes might go up 20%. Well, what? That is not going to get people motivated to, and it's not going to turn the economy around if you're going to increase my taxes by 20%. But so can you find some other solutions before you make statements like that, is my point. And I think that, and so on my Twitter feed, I just said, here are some examples. And it was obviously just really kind of, these are options. I'm not saying do this, but if I look at the budget, where can I find $200 million? And so I laid it out. There's various areas. And I didn't even include the stabilization fund. So you don't want to take all that stabilization fund because it's meant for mainly if earthquakes happen and things like that. But you could use some of that cash, say take 100 million, okay, or even 80 million. Okay, so now we're down to 100 million. Okay, now we can take some other areas. We look at the budget, for example, government, general government, police, engineering, and planning, and since 2015 have gone up $160 million in the operating budget. In 5 years. So we have the operating budget and the capital budget. That's where some people get confused. Capital is what you pay for to build things like, the whole viaducts, going down. That comes from the capital budget, or any infrastructure. And we use money from developers. We get these things called community amenity contributions. They're down by half, by the way, year over year. They're down to less than about 130 million from 250 million previous year. So these are, but that money's been allocated. So we go through public hearings, you allocate any money that comes in, it gets allocated. So there's not much money to really go, oh, let's just use that, let's move that money over here, because you have literally legally allocated that money. Those CACs, now they're about $600 million of CACs sitting ready to be used, but not available to be used for anything else but the designated stuff that were in the public hearing documents. So
if it's already been allocated to become a spinning chandelier,
you can't. In order to change that, you have to go through another public hearing process. Basically, you have to ask and you really start to really anger. And a majority of the money for CACs now is housing. So do you really want to talk about removing the housing fund and putting that into paying for the operating budget because you don't have other places to cut. So in my mind, there's one way is to look at that fund and then look at some real estate deals and find ways to do leasehold on a few key properties. We have a piece of property at Burrard and Pacific where when we finished the Burrard Street Bridge, prime giant piece of property. There used to be an Art Naps there.
I know the one. Kettle of Fish.
That Kettle of Fish. That whole site is the city of Vancouver, right down to basically beach, from Pacific almost all the way down the beach. Huge site.
Yeah.
Easily 70 to $100 million site. 60-story tower could go there, nobody'd complain. So the opportunity to not sell it, I don't believe in selling properties, but you could do a 99-year lease with a developer, who I'm sure there are many developers who'd be very interested in getting that piece of property. You might not get as much as you would have a year ago, but easily you could get a big chunk of money that could pay down this and get into the operating budget. So different ways of finding that 200 million. I would say, if I would not be surprised if the premier said, "Hold on there, Kennedy, buddy. What have you, show me what you've done that you now are asking for this." And if you want the money, then it has to be project specific, that it's a job creator, that it's going to inject something into the economy. It's not just about paying your bills to do your street cleaning and stuff like that. No. You need to show us, I mean, what are you going to build? Is it a bridge? Is it what is it? And how many jobs will it create? Then the premier might be, and the province might be, oh, all right, okay, that makes sense. And also there's the fact that they're going to have every city across the province now asking for cash. Is it got White Rock? You got, whatever town has a couple million here, $500,000 there, $200,000 there, $1 million there. Next thing you know, the government's giving $2-3 billion away. I mean, they don't have it. They need to use that money for the things that they are in charge of. And the cities need to deal with their own issues. And so I went on a bit of a rant on Twitter, and of course, I think that much hate, but the usual suspects came after me.
Yeah, but the usual suspects are kind of like, yeah, right. But it's food for thought for those of us, and I mean, there are many of us who are very lucky. I say this week after week in this particular, umbrella of pandemic. I feel very fortunate to just have what I have. Like, imagining people who literally do not have the money to buy food for their family, do not have a job anymore, are up to their eyeballs in debt. And for their mayor to step out and say, by the way, as soon as humanly possible, I'm going to make it more expensive for you here. It's just like, wow. I mean, as a leader, don't you want to step forward and say, kind of to go to where Trudeau is, and certainly John Horgan, and what we've seen from Adrian Dix and Bonnie Henry, the unifying message, the fact that we're all in it together. You do not announce the possibility of a massive tax increase to your citizens during a pandemic. Like, I just don't, even if it's a reality down the road, I don't understand why that happened.
And the only solution you have is to beg for money or raise taxes. These are both, first of all, fanciful. It's like, dream on, buddy. And the other one is just so negative.
Things we can do?
And then perhaps, let's start with the 43 communication staff that,
maybe, how much would that raise, George?
Well, that's $5 million right there, probably. I mean, you wouldn't want to get rid of all of them, but
interesting to note, though, I saw this on, and I didn't mention this to you pre-meeting. Vancouver is awesome. I believe it was Bob who was posting about it, saying that they're looking into where the city of Vancouver's communications department are spending their advertising dollars. It's not on community newspapers. It's on Facebook. Not exactly.
And Twitter,
local.
I saw Twitter
and well. Facebook. Not exactly local. Why isn't the city of Vancouver spending on, maybe we would be more engaged with our local public. We should be moving forward anyway. I mean, we should all just be tuning into what's happening here. This is a big lesson.
Well, and the Vancouver Sun, and the province, and the Courier, and they all have digital assets. So if you want to reach an audience locally, that there is ways to do it. I would say I'd be curious to see the breakdown of that budget, that ad budget. And if the majority of their advertising is going into Facebook, I think that would be very disappointing. I think they need to understand their role in the city, and especially right now, any ways they can support jobs in their city and small business. And I know that people will say, well, the Courier and Vancouver's Awesome is owned by a big corporation. Those papers generally run independently. They're required to have profits, and they don't. They're not allowed to, run deficits and losses. So they have to operate independently. And
VIA put out today their first paper publication, right? They use the Courier platform.
Vancouver, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Today. So there you go.
Well, no, they actually said they delivered the VI was in the Yale town. We got it down here for a long time. For about a year.
Really?
Yeah, downtown.
I guess I'm just getting it in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
Speaking of local publications, we'd be remiss not to mention the Orca, which is the platform you're likely watching us or listening to us from. You can read all of the the pod, the crew that writes regular pieces for the Orca and get daily news. And of course, the Fin, which is my favorite first read every morning from my inbox.
Curated content.
Yeah. Curated content from McLean Kay. He's an amazing editor-in-chief, and he does really read all the papers for you in British Columbia to make sure that you get, here are the must-read columns for today. Monday to Friday, it's in your inbox. They don't sell your information to anybody. You log on to the orca.ca, you put in your email address, share that with your family and your friends so they can be engaged on local content. I do want to touch on BC politics a little bit, because we have been hearing a bit more from Premier John Horgan in the last number of days. And what was Andrew Wilkinson talking about today? Something about getting a coffee in Kitsilano. Did you see that?
No, I didn't. I missed that.
It's another one of those, those good old times of renting kind of comments. And I was just like, I scrolled beyond.
I didn't.
There's
I missed that one.
Hidden joke, but it's like, okay. But what do you think of what
dad jokes galore in our legislature? I think for both leaders. it's
kind of a thing. But Adrian Dix and Bonnie Henry, though, definitely representing British Columbians on a national platform. Every day we watch, first we watch Trudeau, then we watch the First Ministers, then later in the day we watch Bonnie Henry and Adrian Dix deliver theirs, and then the next day we again do it. And oftentimes they're hearing about British Columbia in those first two because of how it's being handled, how this pandemic's being handled here in our province, and it's really something to be seen.
Yeah, and it's interesting Horgan's willingness to give away all the glory to his ministers, which also puts him at risk too if things go badly. So it sort of protects the premier as well. But I think that obviously we're all being quite optimistic about the numbers that we're seeing come in. There seems to be leveling off. It went up a little bit yesterday, but it's funny. In my office, we had a conversation. It's still, that's why this whole stuff with the budget that I started yesterday is interesting, because that seems to be the conversation that is happening. The health thing is, and we'll talk about your column in the end, but it's the issue of the economy, and especially in my office where we have people who are 23, and then they have people like me who are 24.
Not 23.
Not 23. I think I'm 23. I feel 23. They're concerned about, their friends are concerned. They're getting out of university, they have big debts, and then they're coming out and there's no work. It reminds me of my time in 1992 and when I, 91 and the 80s when I got to high school. It's like every time I graduated from any institution, I would be, why is there no jobs? But they're more concerned about that. They're less worried about their health than they are about the economy and their jobs and their future and their debt. It's scary.
But it's scary, but it's also, as is the case with so much right now, it's a little bit of a wake-up call and a pivot. And this isn't to the people in your office, certainly, but sort of an overarching, there are a lot of jobs, or there were a lot of jobs pre-pandemic, and friends of mine who are in the restaurant industry or the service industry of some sort would literally get an employee, train them, and then they would just not show up one day because they got a better job somewhere. Like back in the days of what you were referencing in the 80s, when we were coming out of school and doing our thing, we'd never consider just ghosting one job for the next. You had to build your resume. You had to be thinking in terms of, I have to have the credibility of this so that I can find an opportunity that I can win that opportunity.
I was so afraid that I was about work that I would keep applying for jobs when I had jobs and start taking jobs. I had 3 jobs at one point, working 19 hours a day because I was so afraid of not working. I was literally working 19 hours a day for that whole summer. I mean, cleaning buses.
KFC and Earl's. I'm with you, buddy.
So I was 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. cleaning buses, then I'd sleep for 4 hours, and I'd go to Big Steel Man and sell suits for the rest of the day, and then
Big Steel Man.
Big Steel Man.
Oh my God, I love that.
Oh yeah.
Well, maybe there's some relief to come, because that's what Prime Minister Trudeau did say. Was it yesterday morning? I've lost track of my days. Just saying that he understands that there are gaps in the relief fund that is set up. By the way, my significant other, who I've mentioned here on the program before, Brian, he is a professional chef. He is a corporate chef, and he was laid off fairly quickly. Big company that he works for. The odds are very good that once this ends, he will have his job back, which is great. But nothing's written in stone, obviously. Right. So he immediately applied. He was laid off right away. When everybody was sent home from work, boom, thanks for coming. We'll be in touch. I should say, though, his company continued on with the medical coverage, which I think is extremely classy.
Very nice.
Very nice. So he immediately applied for EI. and was waiting for next steps on that. And then that got bumped over to the relief fund, the emergency fund, and he's already had his first direct deposit. So it's really, it is happening for some. And I was wondering, you were talking about your program.
Because we were talking last week about frustration and Trudeau announcing things and there not being proper systems in place. And he actually, that came up in one of his press conferences this week where I think he was talking about the 75% thing. And the reporter was kind of a little like us last week saying, why do you keep changing, like you keep changing the rules, you keep changing the way it's happening? And he's like, because we've never done this before. We're like literally, creating policy on the fly, and it's not easy. And when we get people complaining about it, we go, okay, well, let's see if we can fix that. And so that's certainly the case with the 75% thing, where they changed the rule for March, where you had to be 15% or 30%. So they're being nimble as much as they can for government. But yeah, that application that that for the $2,000 seems fairly straightforward. You get it within a few days, which is impressive. And then
just don't mess with it. If you don't need it, don't apply for it, because you'll have to pay it back, and it will be on your record.
Well, don't forget you have to pay taxes on it too. Save some money for taxes. And then the
income.
Yeah, and so today I did today they launched the $40,000 loan thing, where you get $30,000, you get $10,000 forgiven if you pay for it by a certain time. So I submitted on that. I don't know but it took 2 minutes to submit to my bank. We'll see, because obviously cash flow is the biggest challenge for business owners. So far, I haven't laid off anybody at my business. We're still quite busy. I mean, it's marketing, but we have a lot of manufacturing clients, and they're busy. They're either retooling or they're dealing with orders that were backed up, actually. And so they're kind of, oh, we're good. What's challenging is they can't travel and they can't go to trade shows. They can't do those things anymore. So I think a lot of businesses are trying to find new ways, just like we're doing this, or schools are doing this, or I think companies selling goods are now trying to find replacements for trade shows, because they're not going anywhere for 6 months at least.
Friday night, which is tomorrow night while we're recording this, I will be broadcasting nationally on the Chorus Radio Network, filling in for Charles Adler from 7 to 10 p.m. from my son's bedroom. I have set up my home studio. Yep, and on Sunday afternoon from 2 to 4 here in British Columbia on CKNW, I will be hosting a 2-hour COVID-19 special, also from Brady's bedroom. It is wild. Technology is amazing. I'm scared
it's ironic
to
too,
do it.
because CKNW spends $1 billion on their new studio, and they're like, yeah, you all work from home now.
Yeah, but I have to tell you, and this is not, I am just a freelancer, but I love the team that I'm on. The internal communications with regard to personal well-being around COVID-19 and being in a pandemic has been remarkable, like legitimately remarkable. They're trying to make sure that we're all really putting ourselves first. The work is very important, obviously, but not as important as our sanity, our livelihood, our mental stability, our health, our physical. Like, don't work extra hard to try and, work your way through this. It's nice. It's really good. I'm glad to report on this UnSpun. Oftentimes we're talking about how we're kind of all being wound up. It's nice to know that there is that messaging at the very least, that they've really been on top of it. And speaking of being on top of it or not, let's turn our attention to south of the border now. We officially have Bernie Sanders out in the race for president of the United States, right? Joe Biden, obviously the presumptive, our favorite word of 2020, our presumptive Democratic candidate. A lot of people talking about Kamala Harris perhaps being his running mate. She's very much out in the forefront. Her messaging right now in the United States is when she's asked, she was on The View recently, when she was asked about whether or not she'd be the running mate, she said, listen, I'm not even thinking about that. I'm thinking about a pandemic, right? She did. And then she said, by the way, I think credit cards should waive interest rates and whatnot. So she's there. Boris Johnson. About it. Of course,
just on the Biden thing. I mean, I think from an electoral point of view, I mean, it's good that Bernie's kind of stepping away, because they, if they want to, in an election, you want to beat the other guy, right? So Bernie needed to read the writing on the wall and get out of there, and let Biden do his team get to work on focusing on Trump. I mean, it's an election now; it's go time, and we're in the middle of a crisis, and it's challenging to campaign, as we've seen some challenges with the Conservative Party in Canada, kind of being, what message are you trying to send here? so, but I think it's important that there be clarity in the campaign time as we head towards that, as we see America head towards that election in the fall. But yeah.
How do you feel about bipartisan politics, regardless of what country it's in during a pandemic? When you see somebody attack another, like when you see somebody attacking Justin Trudeau right now, do you question that? Or you like,
well,
no?
obviously, I get accused of what I said yesterday about Vancouver as being somewhat partisan. So I think to me now we're at a stage where we are getting a handle on this pandemic as far as the process of it, and I certainly see that in the States with Trump, that they are starting to judge him and they're putting a process together to analyze the way he did made decisions. So I don't know. I think it's important to still have a voice of opposition in a crisis, because you can't assume that your leaders in charge are actually making the right decisions. So, but you have to be more subtle for sure. You don't want to be obnoxious and a jerk. But my case in point to the city of Vancouver, there are decisions that I think they can make that would be wise, and I hope they're listening to me. I think that there are, things that they could do differently, and certainly differently in the future, that so we don't end up in this situation again.
Which is going back to having that stabilization fund be built up.
Yeah, save some money for a rainy day.
Save that for the rainy day.
Don't you do that?
You know who taught me to do that? My boomer parents.
Oh, boomers. Oh,
they taught me to save for a rainy day.
You're in trouble this week.
Oh, I am. The boomers are mad. No, the boomers who want to break the rules of a pandemic are mad at me. The ones who are now like coming around to it are like, right. And I got to tell you, my parents have been great. It took me a while to get them there. It took us.
Because you're an Xer, right? You're an Xer?
I'm an Xer. Yeah, I'm a sandwich.
I'm a cusp.
Are you? But you're a young boomer. So the boomers I'm talking to aren't
64, so it's 65, they say. It was I feel like when I watched those movies in the 80s, that was all about me,
right.
all those extra movies, that was my life.
But the boomers I'm talking about are 70 plus and 80 right. plus. When you break down the COVID-19 stats, they are what they are, and people over 70 and particularly over 80, the mortality rate is 25%.
Bad.
25. So 25% of people who get COVID-19 who are over the age of 80 die from it. So I'd like my 80 plus parents to stay home. They're super good. They're healthy. They're motivated. They want to go to the pub. They love the Rose and Crown. They miss the Rose and Crown in Tsawwassen. But I'm like, you know what? You're going to need the pub to be in your living room, just short term. It's not long term. And they came back from Palm Springs. I got to give them credit for this. They came back from Palm Springs and they did the full 14-day quarantine. They did not leave their house. Day one of freedom, my stepdad lost his mind. He went everywhere. I'm like, no. So it was sort of a message, because I've got a number of friends who are like me in their early 50s, who have parents who are in their late 70s, early 80s, who are being stupid. And I mean stupid, like, don't invite your neighbors over for dinner now. You live with people. Those are your people. That's your petri dish. Stay in your petri dish. Easter weekend, you're not having the cousins and the friends and the aunts and uncles over.
Shed your stuff internally with your own team. Yeah, no, it's true. It's really painful. I mean, my 19-year-old son's birthday was this week, and I went and saw him from a distance, because he doesn't live at home anymore. And, and my daughter is 24, she didn't. So we kind of met, and we were all walking with my 12-year-old. We were all kind of walking, trying to keep our 6 feet apart. And I'm like, have a good birthday, my boy. Yes, happy 19th. Here's a beer in the future that you can't go to a bar to have. So it's tough, but it's you got to do it.
That's what my column is about, that, and it really is about that, George, as well. That's really shitty today. It's not forever. Yeah. And just this morning, we had to push our podcast recording forward because I had my absolute favorite young person, non-blood relative who feels like my daughter, Layla, had her bat mitzvah on Zoom.
Bat mitzvah.
Her bat mitzvah was on Zoom, and it was...
That's
there was supposed to be hundreds of people from all over North America here for a huge party that her mom has been planning for 2 solid years. And it was very special, and it happened. And her rabbi, and I'm not Jewish, but I enjoyed and cried and laughed. And this is my second bat mitzvah in that family. And the one thing that was really interesting is you're always going to have the story of how your bat mitzvah happened during a pandemic in 2020. That is the big fish story for years down the road when we all look back and go, can you believe that happened? We're in the can you believe it? right
Yeah,
now.
there's so many weird things that this generation, the younger generation, will go, oh, I remember the time when I was a kid and we had this whole pandemic thing. It was crazy.
Remember that, George? Oh, look, my family's home. That means
Family's
time to
home.
end the
Finish.
podcast. That's it
Bye.
for us.
See you later.
Family, bye.
Bye.